It is April 20th, 2012. Will you please state your name and rank of the military for the record?
All right,
please?
my rank in the military was a private. I was only in 2 years, and
what branch did you serve in? What branch did you serve in?
the Air Force, Army Air Force,
Army Air
United States Army Air Force.
Okay. All right. And can you tell us your name, please?
Chester R. Todd.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank you, Chester. Where were you born at? Where were you born and raised?
Beardstown.
Beardstown. So not very far from here at all.
No.
Great. So how'd you get into the military? Were you drafted or did you enlist?
No. Now, I had been employed with the Burlington Railroad.
Okay.
All right. And because that was what moved people and equipment around back then, it was very important. Okay, so
Okay.
I was, they didn't call it deferment, can't think of the word to tell you. Anyway, the railroad job is what kept us out of the military.
Okay.
Well, but now that wasn't intentional. That was because it happened that way. That was where I made my living, with the railroad. And I was in the military the last 2 years of the WW2 conflict.
Yeah.
And most of the kids that I knew at school age and what have you like that, they'd already in there. They had already got in there and soaked up all of the rank. Yeah. And the Air Force was full of college graduates and people that was in training and what have you like that. And they was got part of their money for school, ROTC.
Okay.
All right. And so then they was all commissioned officers.
Okay.
And then everybody else was a sergeant except me. Yeah.
Okay. So then you served just 2 years in World War II. That's correct. You served from
Yeah.
43
Now I went a
to
long
45.
time, and I didn't have a MOS because I started at Fort Sheridan. All right, and they didn't have no place to send me, so they said, "Well, could I get a job?" I said, "Yeah, I can get a job in Peoria."
Yeah.
And I done that. Well, then about 3 months, something like that. Well, then I was supposed to report back to Fort Sheridan, but in the process of doing it, I had a streptococcus sore throat. Now that was very serious back then. They didn't have
Didn't have any way to.
antibiotics.
Yeah.
The regional lab in Peoria, which was a federal project, and they had discovered sulfonilamide, sulfadiazine, and some of that sulfa drugs. And that's why I'm alive today. That sulfa drugs done it.
Okay.
But I spent over a month in the hospital. Okay, I was assigned to go to a school in North Carolina to qualify for navigation. Well, that was scrapped. That was gone. See, well, and they had so many people they didn't know where to put them, and they didn't know what to do, and so they mostly done nothing. And I was in charge of transit barracks for a short time. Now, Sheridan had beautiful facilities, but they also had a group of old World War I militia barracks.
World War I.
And I got these transits in, and I'd done that for a month or so.
Okay.
And where you have an idea of it, I had musicians, students, and there was a fellow that played ball for the Chicago Bears,
Oh, how about that?
Bronco Nogurski. Is anybody old enough to remember who Bronco Nogurski was?
I know who he is, but
Yeah.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you know.
He was
Yeah. I
a
like the Bears.
world hero. And then he met this beautiful girl in Chicago,
Uh-oh.
and they married. And then she was a model, and modeled and had her picture on wine bottles. Virginia Dare was a brand name. Okay, and old Bronco, he was proud of that woman, and what have you. See, well, that went on for a short while. So then they decided they'd send me somewhere. So they sent me to Jefferson Barracks at St. Louis and put me in basic training again. Honestly, yeah. And I had to make a 20-mile hike down there in the Missouri hills, and my legs didn't want to do it. And there's a kid from over here close to Canton, Missouri. He's big as you or bigger. And when I couldn't walk, he'd carry me.
Oh yeah, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
Wow.
And they didn't want me to scratch out, see. And we got through that. Well, then what was they going to do? So they called us all out one morning, and it was in a tent city, all right, double row. They called us all out and lined us all up and called names and called names and called names and never did call his name, and they never did call my name. So we wised up to some of the stuff by then, see. So we just decided we'd slip off, and did. But now, our downfall was we'd went by the butcher shop and scarfed some steaks, and this fellow his name was Yoakum. A big fella, raw bone, and smarter than anybody I'd ever been around in my life. Mm-hmm. He could shoot gray squirrels with a slingshot off of a limb, running.
Wow.
Anyhow, he put these steaks in his coat pocket, see, and we got back to our quarters and had this little pot belly stove like that, and get it hot. And we was cooking this meat on there and making smells, see. Oh, that didn't work out. So here comes somebody and they throw the door open. Attention! And what's going on in here? Well, we're cooking meat. You got enough for us too? That's what he said. He was a commissioned officer. And yeah, we got enough for you two guys. And he had a sergeant with him, and we went ahead and finished cooking our meat. We had bread and the meat. We didn't have nothing else. And said, okay. He said, we'll be back in an hour. We want this place cleaned up and the grease off of the floor and what have you. And they sent us to Galesburg, and with Burlington, I guess. Been to Burlington Railroad.
Yeah.
Oh.
And to go for reclassification. Now this is, my career in the military was zilch. I contributed hardly nothing. But I seen a lot of happenings and was involved in some of them. All right, so
That's what we want to hear about.
yeah, I met this fella, and he was dressed like all the other soldiers. Had an old long-tailed coat. That stuff. See, we kind of buddied up, and I had to go to Salt Lake City. I think the way it worked, why, I could tell that he had some formal education. He knew a lot of things that I didn't know, and I knew some of the things he didn't know because I grew up in a Bridgetown. Bridgetown was a rowdy town, and still is. And that's why I'm telling it like it is.
Yeah.
That's what
That's part of the story.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And he disappeared. And
He disappeared? You said he disappeared?
yeah, he disappeared. I didn't see him anymore
Didn't
for
see
quite
him.
a long time. And then now he was a private at that time in the Army. And I thought he was probably like myself. He wasn't assigned to anything and that, and I wasn't. And so I had to go through reclassification at Kearns, Utah, which is out on the South Flats. And when you got out of the vehicle, you couldn't see anything except dirt at your feet. There was nothing you could see or there. Now that was, see, where I lived, why you could see everything all the time.
Yeah.
Like here.
What did that feel like?
Yeah.
What'd you feel
Well, it
like?
was probably about like the astronauts, I imagine.
Another planet?
Yeah, you just, it was a bewildering amazement.
I'll bet.
Yeah. And so I was there a few days, and there's some fellows showed up from Alaska. And made a group of 9. And we talked to this guy, and he had a book about like that, and it had a million things in it, you know, about where he could send us. And there, he wanted to send us to a place that was popular. See, well, we knew better than that because it wasn't anything there for us. We don't. These guys that had been in Alaska, one of them was a staff sergeant, a couple of them was buck sergeants. Now, I don't remember what the rest was, mostly like myself. And looked through this book, and he named different places. Well, we didn't want to go there. Well, we didn't want to go there. And we just one-on-one, you know. He was just a soldier like us. Mm-hmm. And we didn't have to any formalities. And they had 5 places in Kansas. And didn't know what was there, but they was going to staff them, and they had been all built about the same time, and there was going to be B-29 bases. And
Bombers.
where'd we want to go? Well, we didn't know anything about Kansas. I didn't know anything about Kansas. It was south of Bridgetown. That's about as good as I knew. And so we picked Great Bend, Kansas. Now, the train that left Denver didn't go that way. It went southwest. See, we had to go east.
Yeah.
All right, so the conductor on the train put us off at Dodge City, Kansas, because he thought that was probably the best place for us.
Okay.
And the camp at, what'd I call it?
No, the Dodge City.
You were at
The
Dodge
base in Kansas.
Um,
Great Bend.
yeah, that's
There
it.
you go. That's it.
Okay. And there was no public transportation east.
So you couldn't take public transit there.
Yeah, there was
So
no
how
way
far-
for us to get to Great Bend, Kansas from Dodge City, Kansas. About 90 miles.
Was it 90 miles?
What did you have to do?
And this is what happened. A girl that was a postmaster would lock us up in the post office at 9 o'clock at night so we had a place to sleep.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you were stuck then in Dodge City?
Yeah. And we was there for about a week, and there was half a company of Army engineers at Great Bend that was staying through the winter to do the dirt work to finish up in the spring. All right, so this girl at Dodge City was real helpful and tried to get us set up, and things. They didn't want to come and get us. They couldn't pay us, and food rations. All right, and the rations were fairly strict.
Right.
Like if they had rations for 35 people, well, 4 more was too much. Well, they didn't want us. They didn't want to come and get us. But then this fellow said that they was, and we didn't know this, but now over at Wichita, Boeing had set up a place to help build these B-29s.
Okay.
And so she called over there and got hold of somebody in the Air Force, and they were going to send somebody over to be in command, and that way we'd have somebody that could pay us, and they'd get rations for us and whatever else we needed like that. And this is not really a long story. I'm telling it sounds like quite a bit of time. This was all going pretty fast stuff, see.
Okay.
And Great Bend had a huge oil field, deep wells, some of the deepest that had ever been drilled, heavy producers.
Wow.
And a young fellow that his father had sold land to the government for the air base, and they had 5 wells. 2 of them they pumped, and the government had 3 of them capped for reserve. 800 barrels production a day. But back then, the price on a barrel of oil wasn't much.
Low, yeah.
And one of the unique things, we got acquainted with this guy real good, and not the older fellow, he had passed on, but the boy. And he liked to hunt coyotes. And that looked like a pretty good activity to me. But anyhow, I could get .30-06 ammunition. You couldn't buy it at the store. There wasn't no ammunition to be bought, see, like that. And I'd scarf some of that and help him a little bit and help myself as well.
Okay.
And had a good time out of that. Now, the Dust Bowl days in Kansas blew a lot of the surface off.
Right. Topsoil.
Then when it did rain, it made rivulets, and it'd be maybe like an inch wide and an inch deep, and then 3 feet farther was progressive.
Yeah.
And it got to where they was like 12 or 15 feet deep and maybe 15 or 20 feet wide,
Wow.
down towards the Arkansas River.
Okay.
And in the night, you didn't want to go very fast, because if you'd get one of them, and but when I got through that, this guy was a millionaire, and he had no idea what a million was. This young fella. They had 4 miles. They had owned 2 D8 cats. They plowed 4 miles in one trip. Turned around and come back. 22 plowshares, 22 bottoms
Wow.
at a time.
Each way? That's pretty wide.
Yeah. D8 cat was a pretty big machine.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm telling this stuff, is because it was all unique. Nobody knew anything about it where we lived back here, see. But they done it different down there. And got through that part of my life, and we got a commander that was a captain from World War I, reserve officer. Well, that sounds like a long time. Well, there wasn't a very big gap between World War I and World War II.
That's right.
And he wasn't a very old man. Might have been 45, something like that.
Okay.
And set up a office in one end of a barracks, and now this is a kind of a good part. And we had a pay officer that came from Wichita,
Okay.
and this guy that was the captain was a genuine army man, and knew things to do. So what they done was, they got some wood off of the engineers and made a crap table and put that in one end of the room that we got paid in. Yeah. And that's a good part of the story. Very unique.
I like that.
I don't know if the military had another place in the whole country that they had a crap table in the same room they handed out the money. And messed around. Now, the first duty I had, well, they had the control towers up, and 2 or 3 of these bases, there was 5 of them, 2 or 3 of them, while they was designated for emergency landings for the Air Force people, and somebody had to have duty in the tower. Well, I'd take the night shift, which was all night, 12 hours, and that's because I was a private and the other guy was a sergeant. And I had a plane come, a B-17, and they'd come from Alaska. But now they had stopped 2 other places, but they had some connections made, and it was real important to them to be out in the boonies where they could do this with some secrecy, because they had the wings of that B-17 stuffed with fur from Alaska.
Oh, trader.
Yeah,
So-
money.
Yeah, there you go.
Fur always brought good prices, you know.
I bet.
And that's what these guys were doing. They had spent all of their money buying this fur up there in Alaska, and got it down there, and they wanted to get out in the boonies. Well, so they was going to, let's see, what they call it, command. They was going to command my vehicle. And no, I said, I can't do that. Got them on the ground. All I had to do to get them on the ground was just turn the lights on so they could see where to land. See, it wasn't nothing technical about it.
Right.
And they was going to commander my vehicle. I said, no, you can't do that. I said, I have to sign for that. And I said, I'd be in real bad shape if I didn't have no vehicle. Well, so then what could they do? Well, who was in charge? Well, pretty much nobody. And at that time of the day, well, I was it.
Middle of the night, right?
Yeah.
You just-
So
nobody was.
well, now so he wanted to make some connections with these people that was going to meet him to take care of the fur butchers, see. And well, I didn't have an outside telephone. Well, where could they find an outside telephone? Well, the people that was the Army engineers had a headquarters building and what have you, so they do that. So I suggested that that's what they do and leave my vehicle alone. And so they
To
did.
somebody else.
And that was the end of that story because they disappeared.
Okay.
The furs and them and the airplane sat there.
And they just
Yeah.
left the airplane there.
And I was with the 20th Air Force, 73rd Wing, 498th Group, 874th Squadron, and went overseas with them.
Wow, you have a good memory.
Saipan Island.
Well, okay.
I was 14 months on Saipan Island. And that took up the rest of the 2 years of my time in the service.
Okay.
And when our main supply boat got sunk up close to Hawaii.
Okay.
Okay, we got to this island, and our accommodations consisted of pup tents that they got off of the Army engineers, or no, Seabees, on bare ground in a tropical climate. That was misery. And we didn't have fresh water, and we ate them K rations, Cracker Jack boxes. We ate them for about 4 months before we got good food. That was miserable. And finally, when everything got organized, now I drove a truck. I worked at an asphalt plant. I worked with Seabees, I guess it would have been, drilling holes. The whole island was coral rock, but now there was dirt over some of it. And they wanted to drill these holes to get rid of the water up where the parking areas was and the takeoff landing strips and that stuff.
Oh, drain it away from the.
Drain the surface water, because when it rained a lot.
You didn't
Build
want to
up.
wash.
Yeah.
And build up, yeah.
And several of the guys kept a record on rain one day, and it rained 21 times. And it would either get you wet, splattering up, or coming down. Yeah, 21 different rain. Now, that was like you could, you can do it here a little bit, not much, but over there, with the way it rained, where they just come like that and drowned everything, and then maybe 15 minutes later, another one coming like that. Well, that we needed that fresh water. We didn't have fresh water.
Yeah,
We
all
had
you
that
had.
salt on us out of the air, and feel it on your skin like that. See, and if you was
You
really
had no way to make any fresh water.
well, they
Did they
did.
have it? Oh, they did.
But it was slow. See, there's a lot of us. A squadron was 350 men. 3 squadrons and the group squadron.
About 1,000.
Yeah,
people.
that's a lot of people. And if you was real lucky, you'd get a chance to soap up and get rinsed off with a hose out of the water tank. Some days you didn't get that privilege. And they had both. Tinian was only 5 miles away It separated the two islands. All right, at night, why, we could see bullets going this way and that way and one thing and another over there, and they could see the same thing over where we was at, only we wasn't right where we was in danger of it.
Okay.
And they had these guys that holed up in these caves. They made these caves in that coral rock. You could, the coral rock was soft enough that you could, any kind of a chisel or anything, you could just make lots of room with that. And they hid out, and they'd come out in the dark and one thing there. Now, one of the things we saw, I had a fellow from Rock Island, and I together, and we saw something happening. Didn't know what it was, so we stopped and had a vehicle, stopped and got out of the vehicle and was watching. And the Japs had what they called a one-man tank. And this guy was standing up with that much of his body showing, and he had a machine gun, and he was driving the tank, or somebody else was driving the tank. We never did know the truth about that, whether there was another man in there or not. But anyway, while he was wanting to shoot somebody, when the Marines was hid, had a flamethrower. And he got close enough to use that, and they turned that flamethrower on him, set him on fire. Half of him sticking out of the top of that tank. And we just witnessed it like you would somebody doing work out here down the road a ways.
It just
Yeah.
happened, and
They
That was normal.
yeah, they turn them flamethrowers in them caves, and they might not burn anybody up, but if there's anybody in there, well, they'd be hiding back, well, they'd use all the oxygen, so they'd suffocate.
yeah.
And what have you like that. And then we finally got organized and got to getting planes, but now the Japs had some planes that they could fly off of a aircraft carrier, and that didn't get them close enough to carry a pretty heavy bomb. And they'd fly over and drop a couple of bombs and probably go to oblivion because there wasn't no way they were going to get back on that aircraft carrier. And one of the planes, we had a fairly large blockhouse that the Japs had there to store stuff in. It had 6-foot thick walls and a roof, and then they had another parapet around the roof with sand.
Okay.
And the Navy had hit the side of this 2 different times and blowed a hole in it you could drive a small truck through. But anyhow, this is the other part of the story. So I had guard duty because there was still a few Japs around, and they'd sometimes sneak out and do some mischief. And heard something going whoosh, 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 like that. See, and I happened to know that because I'd been in down close to Alamogordo, New Mexico. There's a bombing range down there with a crew. See, and them bombs wouldn't go straight down like a bullet. They'd flop around like that. See, and you could hear that. Yeah. I told this kid, I said, we got to run. When we made a run for that blockhouse, and the bomb that they dropped blowed the whole front off of that B-29. There was nothing left but one wingtip and a couple of engines burning, and all the tail section, and a hole about 15 feet deep in the dirt. That was a unique experience.
I would guess
Yeah.
so, yeah.
And had I not been aware of actually hearing a bomb falling like that, Well, there were probably times you wouldn't have heard it. Or maybe if you didn't know, you wouldn't have paid any attention to it. But we happened to have the smarts to do it, and we run, and it was good we did, because we both had a cot set up under the wing of that plane.
Oh,
And
my
then-
goodness.
Yeah, that's been bad news.
Yeah.
So were you
wouldn't be here now.
asleep? Were you asleep and then you woke up when you heard that, or were you just on watch, on guard?
Yeah.
You were on guard.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so you heard it, and then it was like it's
Yeah.
time to go. Right?
Yeah. And that's what I told you about the experiences. They could have easily done without me in the war effort. I'd have been more valuable to the railroad than actually what I'd done in the war effort. Well, so then later on, why I was classified as an ordnance armor,
Okay.
which was kind of vague. And it ended up mostly with putting bombs in the airplanes. And I'd done quite a bit of that, several months of it. And
Well, that's some story.
Yeah.
You know, we got to close up the interview. We got to get these guys back over here. But it sounds like you lived.
Yeah.
You have a really good memory. You know, you're very good with detail. You remember a lot of detail. And if a bomb goes off, that's probably why.
Yeah.
I mean, I can imagine. I don't know what that's like, but for a bomb to go off, that's probably why you were able to remember everything in such detail. But we really appreciate this. These kind of stories help us, helps these guys.
yeah,
Because none of us were there, and that's what we're doing this for. We want to
Yeah.
be able to tell your story to other people.
these planes weighed about 80.
80 tons.
They weighed as much as if you remember ever seeing a big steam engine.
Yeah.
Okay,
About like
well,
that.
about 80 tons.
80 tons. Wow.
Yeah, that's
See,
like
that's what they got off the ground. Now, we had a storm while I was on the island, and it was in the whole South China Sea. It was the monsoon season. And they had rings set in the parking areas and
Yeah.
stuff like that, and put cables over the barracks and fastened them down and stuff like that. And it'd blow hard enough that them big planes, and they weren't loaded, and I probably had gas, had fuel,
Lift them up.
but they'd actually, they wouldn't come clear off of the ground, but they'd actually come up and go like
Yeah,
that,
up a
see?
little bit.
Yeah. And that was something new to me, and that was amazed me. And then one of the other things was, somebody said, well, there's did I see the boat down? Well, on the one side of the island started at sea level and come up like that, see, and then on the other side of the island there was a cliff and a cove and what have you. Well, now there was a British boat called can't think of it. About the size of a destroyer,
Okay.
Corvette.
All right.
That was the
name.
British designation for the name of the boat, see. And it had come in over the reef and was high and dry. The tide had went back out again. The waves, they set up a transit one day, and they had waves that was 42 feet high on the ocean.
Yeah.
That's a lot of high.
Those are high waves. Yeah.
And that's what happened to this Corvette. It come in over the reef and didn't even scratch the paint and was sitting high and dry on the sand.
Wow.
And the guys, when they're organized like that, you'd be the same. And these Britishers were different people than Americans. and they was out on the sand playing soccer. Yeah, and they'd just come in the dark, and they immediately got out on the sand and was having a soccer game. Yeah, and we had these different sights that we got to see. Now, during this stormy season, well, it was not unusual to have water spouts, maybe quite a few of them. Some of them fairly big around, some of them fairly narrow and up high and all that good stuff. And this was the bigger ones would be like maybe, I'll say like maybe 40 foot through.
Okay.
That'd be a lot of water if it was 300 foot in the air.
that's-
Yeah, all that stuff was amazing. And they had, the Japs and the Americans both had places that they tried to take their boats to get away from that for that length of time, and did. And I don't know how much trouble they had with losing equipment and stuff, but been quite a bit of it.
Wow.
And we got through that part, and then they was organizing the 58th Task Force, and they had boats as far as you could see in all directions off of Saipan Island, and they had a meeting with the Japanese Navy. I can't tell you the exact location for it, but it was all, the general area was the South China Sea,
Okay.
the Philippines, and
Yeah.
a whole bunch of them other islands was in that area. All right. And they had several planes fly over the Japanese to see what was going on, and there's one-way trips. They didn't have enough gas to
Has to
go
come back.
and back, see, so they'd done it with the radio, and one thing in there, and reporter on that, and this one time when they decided they was going to shoot these planes down, see, well now, that's, there wasn't a lot of planes got shot down with anti-aircraft. They a lot of over in Europe now. That was different. They shot a lot of the
Right.
planes down over there. But Mike, my bunk was this way in these tents. We had better tents then. We got out of the pup tents. And two this way, two that way, and two that way, and one in the doorway. And Mike was sitting over there, and we're talking like that, and I thought, something just come in here, see? And there was a piece of shrapnel come through the side of that tent, and at an angle, and didn't miss Mike much and hit the floor. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, that was kind of a scary.
I can imagine. Yeah.
And
Well, Chester, we're gonna have to close up the interview. I got to get these guys back to a class.
Okay.
And right, they got to go back now to a class. But we want to thank you for this interview,
sure.
because I've never heard stories like this.
Yeah.
So
Well,
much detail.
that's what I had.
Those
see.
are very good
To
stories.
be, I went quite a few places here in the United States, and knocked around out there. Had to go up to Evo one time with a Navy boat and pick up some aircraft engines. They had a plane that got to land up there without crashing and killing themselves, and went up there to get the engines and bring them back. I've got to make that trip.
So you got you.
Stuff
made
like
these-
that.
You
have
made
a lot
Yeah,
to
and
tell.
had I been had more rank, see, why, I missed that stuff.
Yeah.
was a
Well,
grunt.
there you go. There you
I was
go.
a grunt.
You got all that experience.
That's what
Those
it amounted to.
stories, those are good stories. That's
And-
what we're looking for.
Yeah, but they had a point system when they discharged, and I qualified for that. I had 35 points, and I think you only had to have 30. And so we had to come back to Fort Sheridan to get her discharged. But we got our papers and stuff, and I was with two guys from Ann Arbor, Michigan, and myself, and we was on our own. Get back the best way you can do
However
it.
you can.
A lot of people were.
And we bribed our way.
You did.
I